Well, hello and welcome again as we continue our chronological read through of Scripture, as we continue our trip through Leviticus at this point. Yesterday, we closed by reading about the diagnosing of various skin diseases and distinguishing between the clean and the unclean. Today, we're going to read about the purification of those who have recovered from a skin disease. Now, remember that one of the primary tasks of the priest was to distinguish between the clean and the unclean. That was the lesson that we learned in the death of Aaron's two oldest sons. Today, we look at the process of taking someone who is unclean and unable to be in the presence of God or the people and making them clean so that they can once again be in God's presence, so that they can share in the holy food, and so that they can live again among God's people. Now, you can read all of the detail in chapter 14, but I'm going to draw on Kleinig's Concordia commentary on Leviticus to summarize chapter 14 in this way. The priest goes out of the city to meet the person who had the skin disease. He's outside of the camp because he's unclean. He can't be around anybody else. So the priest meets him out there, determines whether or not he is healed or not. That person, if he is healed, then is made able to enter into the camp, though not the sanctuary or his home yet, but he's made able to enter into the camp by a ritual sprinkling of blood, by the washing of his clothes, the shaving of his hair, and bathing. 7 days later, that person is then made able to enter the sanctuary by again shaving his hair, washing his clothes, and bathing in water. Now he's able to enter the sanctuary. So on the 8th day, since he initially came back into the camp, he goes to the sanctuary where the priest performs 3 ritual sacrifices, which make him able again to eat the holy food and to enter his home. He's now fully a part of the community. You know, Jesus changes all of this. He doesn't demand, or he doesn't spend his time determining if someone is clean or unclean, and he doesn't perform any rituals. He simply heals through his word and at times his touch. Jesus cleanses us and makes us fit for God's holy presence. He gives us his purity in exchange for our uncleanness. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. The last few verses of chapter 14 deal with another impurity, and that would be of homes that have been unclean by fungus and mold. And once again, we'll see as you read that, you'll see the importance of the priest in determining what is clean and what is unclean. And we're also reminded that Jesus changed things. Jesus did not worry about whether or not a home was clean or unclean. He freely entered into homes of the unclean. People like Levi the tax collector, Simon the leper. And what he did was he brought his purity to them. Very much different than the way things are at this particular point in time. We move on then to Leviticus chapter 13, which deals with various genital discharges, whether those are the normal function of our bodies, whether they come as a result of sexual intercourse, or whether they come as a result of diseases. While these regulations may seem a little bit odd, and we really don't have an explanation for why God enacted them, it is clear that they did prevent the Israelites from adopting certain pagan and occult practices that were associated with fertility in their particular area, because nothing that was unclean could come into the Lord's presence in the sanctuary. I mean, remember what happened when Aaron's two oldest sons brought in unauthorized fire to the sanctuary. So what this did was this helped to assure, by not allowing Israel to get mixed up in the pagan practices that were going around them, it assured a proper understanding of fertility and reproduction. That while fertility is God's gift, and while reproduction is certainly God's will and command, it is not to be considered divine or sacred, and it remains therefore in the realm of the common and cannot be appropriated to the realm of worship. It's fascinating how we see these things again fulfilled in Jesus. Before Jesus, outside agents could make one unclean. In other words, things that were happening outside of you that touched you could make you unclean. Leviticus explains the steps to be taken to become clean again. Actually, remember also when Jesus talked to the scribes and the Pharisees, explaining to them that it wasn't what goes into you that makes you unclean, it's what comes out of you. He's getting to the idea of the heart, okay? Anyway, Jesus makes things clean directly. He exchanges something's uncleanness for his purity. After reading this, you're going to come to understand that the woman with the continual menstrual discharge who touched the edge of Jesus' robe, and we would have expected to have made him unclean, but it doesn't work that way. Rather than Jesus becoming unclean because of the woman touching her, the woman becomes clean. She becomes purified and healed. Jesus exchanges her impurity for his purity. The same would be true of Jesus touching Jairus' daughter and raising her from the dead. Rather than being defiled by the uncleanness of the dead, Jesus gives the dead one life and makes her clean. Those things that were once disqualified from being in the presence of God are now welcome. Notice also that there's no mention in the New Testament of anyone being disqualified from attending the divine service or receiving the sacrament of the altar for these types of things. As baptized believers, we remain clean and able to come into God's presence regardless of what is happening with our bodies. It is Jesus who makes us clean, who makes us pure, who makes us presentable before the Father in heaven. May God be with you and bless you. As always, I continue to pray that as you are reading these things, you'll see some insights into what is happening in, for example, the various accounts we have of Jesus' life and what it is that is happening in our lives as well. May God be with you, bless you. Look forward to joining with you again tomorrow.